Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the supportive viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald on the square in Jacksonville at Holly Cakes Bakery, one of the newer businesses on the square here. A friend of mine recently said, you have got to go to Holly Cakes Bakery Facebook page and take a look at what this woman does. And I did. And then I said to myself, we have got to find out how a person can do this. Holly Stewart, talk about good and bad luck. Okay.
Right.
You wanted to move onto the square in Jacksonville for several years. A place
Certainly.
finally becomes available, and you move in March of 2020. And then tell me what happened.
Well, there was a pandemic, and so we immediately shut down and quarantined for 3 weeks. And then after 3 weeks, I decided that if I didn't try to do something to reopen, that my business probably wouldn't last. And absolutely, we decided that we had to come back to work and, try to support my community the best I know how.
Yeah. You know, this story is about a lot of things. It's not just about the pandemic and how this small business, compensated for it. But I heard about you because of these remarkable pieces of art that you make called cakes.
Thank you.
And so I went to your website and I looked at them and I said, yeah, there's a story there. There's a story there because she's on the square in Jacksonville, which is a growing business community.
Indeed.
There's a story there because of the pandemic, although that's less of the story. But there's also a story there because you've been making these cakes for, 20 some years?
Just over a decade, actually.
Oh, over a decade. Okay, I thought you said that you'd been working in Carbondale some 20 years ago on these cakes, but...
I was only a cake decorator in Carbondale for about 6 years.
Only 6 years, okay.
So I've been doing it for about 12, 13 years.
What was the name of that shop in Carbondale?
Larry's House of Cakes.
And people know it down there, don't they?
Yes, they're very well known.
Okay, so then they lost you though, because you wanted to move to Jacksonville.
Indeed.
Okay, you went to University, SIU in Carbondale, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay, you're a Saluki.
You
You came to Jacksonville, you opened your business, then 2.5 years later you open on the square, and the pandemic hits and you adjust to that. Show us sort of how the adjustments made. You sort of had to move things around in here, didn't you?
Yes, our counter used to actually be along that wall, and this was pushed back so that people could come in the door and flow around in a circle. However, being that the pandemic hit, we had to make adjustments. So no one's allowed any further in than just inside the door. We actually have to keep a barricade so that they don't come around the counter.
Yeah.
We try to minimize individuals in the building to one at a time. But if people have small children, then of course they can bring their children in. We prefer that people wear a mask when they come in, and we typically have masks on at all times. I only don't have one on because
you're being interviewed.
Right. Yeah. And so, their contact is very minimal. They come to the counter, we get their order, or they can pick things that are readily available for purchase. And then after every customer, everything is sanitized, door handles, the countertops, the computer screens, and everything that people may have come into contact with. And that's the best way we know how to deal with it. That's the most comfortable I feel.
I asked you when we were getting ready to do this, if you would bake us a cake.
Yes.
And in order to do that, I mean, for our purposes, for TV purposes, we had to kind of ask you to do it in phases for us so we could see it, because we can't stay all day while you make a cake.
Of course.
But I wanted to show some of these remarkable creations. But first, I want to tempt the audience with some of these pictures that we have here, because if we start at the top here, we can see what a three-dimensional cake actually is. This looks like a roast hog.
That is exactly what they requested, and they even requested a beer can in his mouth. So this is why he's got the little can in there.
And I love this rear shot here.
I love the little pig behind. It's pretty cute.
So I wonder who got the pig's rump. And now somebody had a Yorkie, And they asked if you couldn't duplicate that little pet
Yep.
Yorkie. And look how in the world we're going to find out how you get these textures, these little fur and hair that the Yorkie's got.
The hairs on his face, I actually did individually, one at a time.
One at a time.
His body is a little bit different, and I'll explain that once I show you the cake that I'm about to present to you. So.
Okay. And there's some others here. Here's the donkey. Happy birthday, donkey. And this dog, it looks like he looks like he's sitting on your lap, actually, just staring at you. They're really very, very fascinating. And you call these three-dimensional cakes.
Well, in the instance of the car and this dog, these are more of a two-dimensional cake, which means that they're just kind of laying flat. I cut it to the shape of what they're asking, and then draw it on by hand. The three-dimensional cake is actually lifted up and sitting up on the board, and so it's it's more of, and the cake I'm going to do for you today is going to be three-dimensional as well.
Okay. Well, I think that probably what we should do is kind of take a look at some of these cupcakes, these are part of your regular menu, I guess. Usually
Yes.
post a menu, and these cookies and cupcakes are always available. But again, one of the disadvantages to you of this pandemic that we're all dealing with, is the fact that much of your business for large parties, graduations, weddings, and all these kind of get-togethers that aren't happening anymore. So you've had to make that adjustment, is how do I market what else I do, because the big stuff's not available. It's not going to happen, right? So you're kind of scaling down what you do, although business hasn't completely fallen apart, as we're going to see when we get into your bakery area.
True. Fortunately for me, I think that a lot of people consider this a comfort food, and in times of crisis, people want some form of comfort, and that's fortunate for me. And they get to come to my shop and pick out some things that are very comforting to them, and then go nestle back in, to try to keep their social distance and stay home. But they've got their sweet treats to keep them company.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go back into what's that area called? The bake shop? What's it?
That's just my kitchen.
Into your kitchen, and you can start showing us the magic of a three-dimensional cake.
Okay? Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, Holly, this is where the magic happens.
Yep.
Now, but we were talking about business and how, it hasn't totally collapsed because you don't have big parties. If we look at this wall over here, you can see that those are all orders that have to be made, and actually out by what? The end of the week or so?
Yes, those will be all fulfilled by Sunday. That's my week this week.
By Sunday, and as we stand here, we're here on a Wednesday. So that's pretty done. And if you look, also you got a clipboard or two clipboards over there, and those are cakes that are to be made well into the future. You just don't want to forget about them, right?
Correct. The top clipboard has cakes orders that go up into October, and then the bottom clipboard are orders that people sometimes just, they'll call me up and say, hey, I just need a cake for, September 19th. And so I make an order for them, and then it just stays there until that week rolls around, and I call them up and we get all the details done.
Gotcha. Okay. So now I want to get into these three-dimensional cakes and how you actually get started on them, okay? Let's start. Start me off.
Okay. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to make a three-dimensional teddy bear. So we start with just a regular sheet cake, and I'm going to cut everything out and stack it from this sheet cake. And so in order to do his body, I'm just going to use a little round pan and make some circles from this. So I'm just going to kind of come around this pan. All right, and so I don't really need this excess here. We'll just go ahead and get rid of that. And forgive me, I did wash my hands. And so this is my pastry bag filled with just buttercream icing. We're just going to cut a little tip off there, so I've got a little space to put him. And in order to adhere him to the board, we're just going to set him right there.
Okay.
And then put a little bit of buttercream icing in between the layers. And we'll do a third. And then, so this will be the basis for his body. And then we'll add other components later. And because we won't want his head to be quite as big, I'm going to use a little bit of a smaller circle in order to do his head, and being that this is kind of a cookie cutter, I can just kind of push it down into the cake. And I think 2 should suffice for that. I'm getting my hands. Oh, leave this. Excuse me. Okay. And so we'll just take this guy and I'll mount him up here. And I have run out of icing, so I am going to need to make another bag.
I bet you go through the icing, don't you?
About 8 buckets of icing a week.
Yeah, your provider must be very happy with you. And that doesn't look like a regular pastry bag to me, though. What's different about that?
This one?
No, the one you just threw away.
They're made of paper.
Paper?
We actually make our pastry bags from paper. The first bakery I worked in, that's how they did it, and it just makes more sense to me.
Just butcher paper and you just roll it up and then throw it away, huh?
Sure. So you just tear it off. And there's a little bit of a technique for just wrapping it around.
Make a cone out of it, yeah.
And I just tape it together. And then we've got this nice little cone for me to go ahead and drop the icing down into.
And the icing never sticks to it, which is nice.
Correct.
And then you just tweak off the end of it?
Just cut off the end.
Off the end.
If I want to use a specific tip in the end of it, I'll cut off the end and drop the tip down inside like I have already done with this one. And then once you're finished with that, you just rip the tip out of the end, make a new bag, drop a tip down.
Yep. Throw the paper away.
It's like magic.
Okay.
But if actually my icing is down under.
Okay, should I get it for you?
Yeah.
Is it this big white container? Okay.
Thank you. So we'll just take that off and stick it down here for now.
Gorgeous.
It's not the fullest bucket, but I've got my spatula down in there, and so I'm just going to drop it on down into the bag. And because I'm using paper, I've already got this open cone, whereas if it were an actual canvas pastry bag or a plastic pastry bag, you'd have to fold it down over your hand. It's very clumsy to deal with. It's just kind of a pain, if you ask me.
Okay.
And then so now I've got my pastry bag.
Now you're ready to go again. Okay.
Yep. And so we'll top them like this. And then if you don't mind, I'm going to move around to my turntable. Carefully. And so because you can see that he's so topsy-turvy, you know, he's a little bit wobbly.
Yeah.
We don't want him to become too top-heavy. And so in order to avoid that, I take some dowel rods and I'm going to just put them right down in.
Okay.
And then I take my handy-dandy mallet and just pound him down into the board to make sure that he is now secured to the board. And he does still look a little bit wobbly, but trust me, as time goes on, I'm going to carve him out. He's going to be much more secured to the board. And so now we've got our basis. I've got these little shears in here that I like to use to cut the tops off of these if I don't hurt my fingers. There we go. And so now we're kind of ready to start carving. I do have this little paring knife that I'm going to use.
And before you carve, though, you already have to have sketches which you followed, because
Indeed.
you don't just do this on the fly. You've already sketched it out, right? So you know exactly what you want it to look like.
Usually I draw a little bit of a schematic. So just as an example, if I were to do a tennis shoe, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch out, you know, the base and bottom of the shoe. And then we would cut out maybe 2 to 3 layers of cake for that, stack them just like we did the bear. And then I'm going to use a second drawing to understand the angles of which I need to carve out that cake to get it rounded and to make it look more like a shoe. But with the bear, I've done quite a few of these in the past, and I can kind of eyeball it a little bit better than I would a tennis shoe. And so I can kind of get myself a little bit, I just know he has to be a little bit rounded.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start rounding them out. I'm just going to start cutting off, you know, some cake. And it's going to fall. It's going to get messy. Cake is a very messy job. It's very sticky. It's very messy. And so my hands are going to be messy.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been doing this for a little bit, so I'm okay with it. If I wanted him to look like he had a little bit more of a rounded behind, I might come around and cut a little lip down here so that he's going to indent, and then I can pull all of that out.
He's starting to look like something already.
It gives you a little bit better of an idea. And you know, so you want that little bit of an indentation for his, where his head's going to circle down at the bottom.
Yeah.
You want him to be a little bit more of a sphere.
Yeah, he has to have a neck, right?
Right. You don't want him to be no neck. No neck, Teddy. We don't want that.
Okay, Holly. Now you've done what you call crumb coating, which
Yes.
means you've covered up the cake surface with icing,
Yes,
and now you can start to build on it.
indeed. And so what I would do next is make him some little legs and feet. And so we'll just take a little bit of cake. I'm not going to waste too much time on carving it out super crazy because he does get covered in fur. So I would just make this as a little leg, and we're going to just stick that right on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I want just a little foot. And maybe round it out just a little bit. And then we'll take his little foot and just stick it right there.
Okay.
And then so, you know, obviously I would give him 2 legs.
Right.
And being that he's already crumb coated, he's ready to be decorated. And then so this little handy dandy bag is how I make his fur. It's actually also used for grass. So what I would do is I would just start and we'll just come all the way around. And then you just keep going until he's completely covered in fur.
Uh-huh. Okay, do a little more on the leg for us so we can
Sure.
sort of see how you build that up. Can we turn that around a little bit? There you go. Yeah. Now that tip, that has to be a special tip because you're getting a real sort of a fine texture there, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little tip. It's got multiple holes in it.
Mm-hmm.
You use it to make grass. You can use it to make, obviously, fur.
Fur, yeah.
The Yorkie that we looked at up front earlier
Yeah.
was made with a similar tip.
That's fantastic.
Although his face was individual hairs, his body I did with one of these.
Yeah. And you can get this in any color you want. This is
Yeah.
just another.
Yeah, I just made this color of icing
Yeah.
myself. I mix all my icing colors because
do?
it just comes in white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I make every color under the rainbow. And so, yeah, you just continue to put the fur on him until he's completely covered.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got one that I have already made for you that is completely covered in fur. If you would like for me to get him out.
I would love to, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see
We no longer
how
do
he
this.
became what he became.
Sure. And so I've got this little teddy that he's kind of prepared. I do have one little limb that I saved so that I could show you guys that I make. Sometimes I make limbs out of Rice Krispie treats.
Oh, that is adorable.
Oh, good. And because I want to go ahead and let his arm stick.
Oh, you're going to give him another arm, a second arm. Okay, that's a
Indeed.
good idea.
And so I don't want to have to ice it from below, so I'm just going to kind of ice it a little bit like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to be kind of maybe putting this little hand up toward his face. Oftentimes I use the Rice Krispie treats because they're lighter. They don't weigh the cake down as much. Oftentimes the 3-dimensional cakes, they can take anywhere from 3 hours
Yeah.
to 6 hours.
Oh my goodness.
I have definitely spent many, many hours
Boy, they are a topic of conversation, though, aren't they? When people get them home, I'm sure they have a lot of fun talking about them.
So now he's got his little arm.
He's got his arm, yeah, and he's got his feet. He needs some features, doesn't he? He needs some eyes.
He does.
And
well,
I don't know if you give him ears or not.
Oh, I do.
Yep.
I've made him some little eyes. We're just going to stick those.
Are those
in there.
edible?
They certainly are. And then I've already pre-made some of his ears.
Okay, so his ears will be covered in fur too?
Yes.
Okay. Do you name these animals, or do you just let them?
You know, I used to. I really did. I used to always have names for them. Sometimes I talk to them.
Yeah. Okay, Holly, we've got the bees and the honey pot, and he's just about finished, right?
Indeed.
But you got to add the honey, I guess, and you're very particular about what this is going to look like. So you're gonna take this material, whatever this is. I'm not sure what that is. What is that called?
It's a clear vanilla gel.
Oh, okay.
And so I use it to make, you know, if it's going to be a gory cake, I use it to make blood. If there's going to be water on the cake, you can use it to make water, add a little bit of blue to it.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm going to do today is add just a little touch of yellow and brown to try to get a little bit of a honey color.
Oh, sure. Boy, that goes a long way, that dye, doesn't it?
Tiny little bit.
Yeah.
But you can see it's kind of the color of honey. And we're just going to kind of take a little bit of it
On his honey pot there.
and put it in his honey pot. Maybe
And the
dribble it
bees
over
have already noticed, haven't they? They've
dribble it
already
over the
noticed
side
it's
a little
there.
bit.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So that he's got a little honey dripping down there.
Yep, yep.
And then maybe this little bee wants a little bit of his honey. We'll stick him on there.
Yep. And he's
so
ready to
now he's got his
ready to
honey.
go to the party.
He's got everything he needs.
That is super. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Holly, you've insisted that we take a cake home with us, and we couldn't be more thankful after watching how you make them. I can't wait to actually taste them. But we get a chance while you're doing this to look at some of the stuff you've done in the past. And I asked you, what do you have a favorite? And you said, no, I don't have a favorite. I love them all. It's like kids, isn't it?
Yes. And you had asked me earlier if I ever name them. And yeah, actually, I usually do name them because I feel the need. I'm kind of eccentric, and I talk to them while I'm making them. But I also have to reconcile that once they go out the door, my children are gone.
Yep.
They have left the nest, and I'm never going to see them again.
And you know, I asked you too. You know, what percentage of your cakes are wedding cakes? And during this unfortunate time, about 10%. But you always make a lot of wedding cakes, and some of those are really something to look at. I'll tell you, they're real remarkable.
Oh, thank you. I do love to make wedding cakes. I love to be a part of people's special day, and to help make their day a little bit more special. And hopefully, you know, brides and grooms walk away thinking that very same thing.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, there are other occasions too. There's graduation parties, and for the birthdays, of course, and kids have their own special, you know, tributes and things that are hot. You know, when things are hot, then you get a lot of requests for the same sort of characters.
Oh, you bet.
Don't you?
Oh yeah, you know, every little girl right now wants a unicorn cake or a mermaid cake. You know, little boys love their trucks and their tractors and their cars and things of that nature.
Oh, that floret is just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I love making roses. They're one of my favorite things to do. And in my opinion, if you don't know how to make a buttercream rose, you don't know how to be a cake decorator. The first place I worked in, that is how you practice, is you made roses, made roses, made roses. And I had a lot of great people that trained me. I was so fortunate to work with some really up and coming cake decorators, and some of them actually have their own bakeries now. And luckily I got to work with those people and, you know, learn some wonderful things. I learned everything I know how to do in just a few years. And I'm so grateful and appreciative.
Now this is truly a tribute to Illinois Stories. You can see that Holly went to a lot of trouble to find the logo and to add it to the decorations. And gee, I wish this would last forever, but the trouble is it's just going to have to get eaten. With another Illinois Story in Jacksonville, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.